I think what I meant is like the settlements that are increasing in some of these areas. And
do you think you can expand on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd also I am not the expert on geopolitics on this issue.
You're a fucking idiot.
You'd think the prospect of a Muslim running for governor of a state President Trump won would be the biggest fear for a certain kind of conservative.
Oh, and what kind of conservative would that be? Maybe the kind of conservative who's worried about the certain type of Islam that condones terrorism, maybe? Maybe the kind of conservative that is seriously worried about the Islamization of Dearborn, Michigan? No, probably just the racist conservative, right?
Fuck you!
The people of Michigan have voted. The people of Michigan.
But the woman Abdul al-Sayed campaigned with this weekend is someone people on the right seem to find far more terrifying.
If by terrifying you mean stupid, in the example of everything that's wrong with socialists.
She won with the assistance of the Democratic Socialists.
Medicare for all, free college tuition.
And she's politically naive enough to have told the truth.
It does seem that way, but I'm not even so sure she told the truth, considering back in 2009 while she was studying economics, she came out and wrote blog posts in favor of Adam Smith's view of the markets. I'm not so sure that she's honest. She may very well be a Trojan horse.
The Daily Caller has published nearly 20 articles on Ocasio-Cortez in the past 9 days, calling her a socialist darling and using headlines like AOC equates ending slavery to electing Democrats. One of their reporters was almost sucked in by Ocasio-Cortez's hypnotic superpower.
They talk about education for your kids, health care for your kids, the things that you want. And you know, if you're not really paying attention to how they're going to pay for it or, you know, the rest of that, it's easy to fall into that trap and say, my kids deserve this.
Well, that reporter is absolutely correct. The scam is, hey, we'll give you all this free stuff if you just vote for us. We won't tell you how we pay for it. And as the years go on, it will fall deeper into an authoritarian regime of control that, well, ends in gulags, whether the socialist want to admit it or not.
But Ocasio-Cortez is not the first Democratic socialist to run for office recently. In fact, just a couple years ago, one ran for president and did pretty well. Yet almost no one on the right covered Bernie Sanders like he was Dr. Doom. Jeff Weaver was Bernie's campaign manager in 2016. When he's not running campaigns, he runs Victory Comics in Falls Church, Virginia.
Oh, well, that explains the ham-handed supervillain metaphor garbage. And I'm sure you're going to continue with that ham-handed nonsense. And there's nothing more ironic than a socialist who owns his own business.
Like, I'm in your comic book store, and I'm thinking, like, you know, they sort of treat Bernie like Two-Face. But, like, Ocasio-Cortez is like the Joker. Like, the super villain.
Bernie is well defined in people's minds. I mean, if you call somebody in Nebraska or Wyoming or Idaho or California or New York and say, tell me about Bernie Sanders, look, they all know who he is. They all have an impression of him. They all have a sense of what he stands for. She's new and undefined. And so, yes, they're going to try to turn her into a caricature.
Well, yeah, there it is. People don't know Cortez. They don't know that she's a batshit insane socialist that pushes policies like abolish profit that are absolute garbage and will destroy any country they're implemented in. And as far as character, well, holding her to her own platform isn't characterizing her unless she made herself a character by pushing stupid-ass policies.
It's a comic book term.
Right. What do you think this means for this rising tide of democratic socialism, to have a person like Ocasio-Cortez vilified to such a degree?
Well, look, I think what it says is that we're winning, right?
You can't just say right after what you say, and it is so, including the fact that recent polls show that as much as 76% of the American people won't vote for a socialist. So I don't know if I would call that winning. But you can persist in these delusions because it'll make it that much easier for the right to solidify its victory from 2016 with a nice cushy win in 2018.
I mean, when you're not winning, they ignore you. You know, they tried to pigeonhole it as like these young white Bernie bros, right? Well,
I think that was more like the Hillary Clinton wing of the Democratic Party and not so much conservatives. But you guys are still mad about that loss, huh?
Well, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is not a young white Bernie bro. So this movement has no boundaries. There aren't no racial boundaries. There are no gender boundaries. There are no gender orientation boundaries. And there are no geographic boundaries, right? It's winning all over the country.
No, I would point to the polling that shows it's not. And yeah, good luck getting red states like Texas to go socialist. You guys are really living in your own fantasy world, huh?
And this to them is terrifying.
They would love to tell voters that what Democrats want is to turn the country into Venezuela.
But that's a fantasy.
No, the fantasy is that your policies would actually work. The reality is your policies will turn this country into places like Venezuela and Cuba. And considering Bernie Sanders honeymooned in the USSR and has had very nice things to say about the Cuban dictator Castro, it very well might be what you want.
Theirs, right? I mean, but the reality is that this is what we in the progressive movement want to talk about. We want to talk about healthcare. We want to talk about a $15 minimum wage. We want to talk about the fact that you have aging parents and you're trying to figure out how you're going to be able to afford to take care of them, or young kids and how you're going to be able to put them to college. These are the issues we want to talk about. And if Republicans want to talk about those issues, let's have that discussion.
Yes, let's have that discussion, because the right will win on all those fronts. Because as long as you're pushing government control my entire life, I'm going to vote against you. And so will millions of other Americans, because they've seen what happened over the 20th century. They saw the bodies piled up, the 100 million dead from policies like yours, the starvation in the Ukraine. Your policies are bankrupt. They don't work, and they'll destroy any country they're implemented in. Even the Scandinavian countries you love so much are moving away from these policies that have ruined their economy and sucked the wealth from their people. You're living in a fantasy land if you think people are actually afraid of Ocasio-Cortez. The right's celebrating because you finally put someone up who's going to say what the left wants and expose them for the totalitarian authoritarians they are. You're living in a fantasy world if you think you're going to win anything with this kind of platform. And I'll be glad to see it when the Democratic Party finally collapses and is relegated to the dustbin of history. We are the Republic's walls. Come and take it.